Hey everybody, today, this exercise, we are going to be getting into the world of color. And we're going to be starting with this exercise. We're going to be looking at color adjustments. So by next week, we're going to be going over how to add and apply new color to different images and compositions that you're working with in Photoshop. For these first couple of explorations into color, we're going to be mostly adjusting the color that you have already achieved through your photo taking process. And what work I am showing to go along with this exercise, and what we're going to be doing with this exercise, it's going to be a very quick one, because I'm going to be showing just a couple of the adjustments that you can use to enhance or to edit and adjust the colors that you've already captured with your digital camera. Is that we're going to be looking at filters and also doing a little bit of contemplation, I guess, or exploration of what these filters are meant to approximate, and how the way that we approach these filters, and also the way that we as viewers interpret and take meaning from these filters, has changed over the course of the past 20 to 15 to 10 years. So what I have here, I'm gonna get that at some point, I promise. This is just a screenshot from my camera app that's built into my iPhone. So I have my very serious self-portrait selfie that I took, and this was apparently before I got a comb for this class. But what you see is probably what you're used to, is when I go into the effects part of the camera function, camera tool. It's all digital, so it is just a program. It adds these pre-made filters, and so it takes the original image, and what it's doing is it's essentially applying color adjustments to the image. And you could do these same things with Photoshop. And I think it's interesting to think about this for a minute, because where these filters and then previous to things like Instagram and these camera apps, they definitely made these filters very mainstream, very accessible. Before these apps were used that much, and also probably before iPhones were invented, people were using Photoshop to do the same thing. And ultimately what these filters are supposed to be doing is they're supposed to be approximating the different types of ways that different film, different cameras, and also different processing film techniques can create these different colors in photography. So color photography is a little bit different than black and white, and just to go into the very basic difference is when you are developing black and white film and developing color film, or I guess I should say not film, but when you're actually using negatives to produce images, you can do a lot of things with black and white film in a darkroom that you can control. As a beginning to intermediate to even advanced photographer with darkroom skills, you're able to do a lot of processes with the different chemicals and the different ways that you're enlarging negatives, the amount of time that you're using. These are all things that when you're working with black and white images and you're producing black and white photographs, you have a lot of control in the darkroom. Color, on the other hand, is a very different process. And so in order to develop color photographs, you need to be in the completely light locked. The process is just totally different. So it's very light locked. So very few photographers are able to manually create color prints. So a lot of, outside of course, taking multiple photographs, and this was before digital photography was invented and was so widely accessible, in order to develop different color schemes or to really be in control of the color that were in their photographs, outside of changing the composition or the subject matter and the lighting and all those types of decisions, a lot was left up to the type of film you were using, the type of chemical process you were using to develop the prints, and then also the type of camera you're using. And those were the types of things that would really change just the overall color palette of your photographs. And that's why now what we see when we see things done by Instagram, there is this, it's just an interesting thing to think about when that's what those Instagram filters are trying to approximate. That's what the filters in your camera app are trying to approximate, is that these old analog chemical processes and film choices. And so now this is all coming back. The point here is that what I think used to signify, when we were looking at images as viewers, a certain time period or a certain process, or a certain camera, or all three, now almost more than that, these types of things signify, oh, this person did this digitally, or oh, this was taken with Instagram, or this is something that was just posted on social media and wasn't, like, I almost feel as though these filters are now a way of saying this was an image that was essentially a snapshot, and then this filter was applied to it to give it this aesthetic that now is really something that we read differently. Because where 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, we would look at that image and say, oh, 10 years ago it was like, oh, I wonder what filter they used in Photoshop, or I wonder how they processed this in Photoshop to get this effect. 20 years ago to 30 years ago would have been, oh, I wonder what kind of chemical process they used and what kind of camera they were using and what kind of film they were using. And now it's as simple as saying, oh, I wonder if they have a new app, or I wonder if that's a new filter, like a new Instagram update that I don't have yet. So these are all things I'm going to be bringing up from time to time in this class, how this changing technology and these advancements in technology are changing the way not only that we make images and produce images, but the way that we as viewers interpret images and see images, and the different types of meaning that we take from images now versus 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, when these technologies were very different. So think about that for a moment, and now we're going to jump into color. So let's go over here to the workspace. Again, this is my pre-comb self-portrait. So I'm just going to be showing everyone a few different color adjustments that you can apply to either your whole image or parts of your image. And I'm also going to very quickly introduce a way of applying adjustments that's a little bit more flexible and powerful than just applying them with a selection to a layer. And this way you can actually save your adjustments the same way that you can save layers. So if you decide that you're about 20 steps down a part of a process and you think, oh, I really wish I hadn't turned that black and white then, or I really wish that I had had more red in that image to start with, you can actually go back and up the red in that image, or change it not to black and white, and without losing all that work. So we're gonna talk about how to do that. So first, let's go to this image, and we are going to see the two adjustments that we're going to be working with primarily are under image. If you go to adjustment, we're going to be looking at color balance, and we're also going to be looking at channel mixer. Now, photo filter, that's just cheating. So if you apply one of these to your photographs, these are essentially things that, this is really similar to some of the pre-done filters that you have in your phones and in apps. And these also are approximating the different filters that you can put on cameras. So you can put these on lenses, and you can get different types of color adjustments that affect all of your images that you take while you have that lens or that filter on. Going back to the things that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be mostly looking at the channel mixer, and then also the color balance. So let's start with color balance. I'm going to first apply this to just my whole image, and it's in a background layer now, and I might change that a little bit later in this exercise. So what color balance does is that I am applying it to the whole thing, and what this does is that this allows you to up the amount of red and green and blue in the mid tones of your image, the shadows of your image, and the highlights of your image. So what does this mean? So what this is doing is that this is right now, because I have midtones selected, it's taking a sample of all the pixels in the image, and it's saying what are the ones that are mostly in the middle. They're not super light, and they're not highlights, and they're not super dark, so they're not shadows. They're all these kind of in-between areas. So these are, if this were black and white, this would be all the grays. But because this is color, you are dealing with different saturations of different tones. So it can be a little bit more complicated. And so what this does is that this allows you to scale and add different colors to all the pixels of a certain range. So so let's say I'm going to take all the kind of midtones of my image. I want to have them be more gray. I'm going to take my highlights, so the lighter areas of my image. I want those to actually be more cyan. And you can already see how these adjustments in the color are creating a color effect overall that looks very similar to some of the filters you have in your camera app, some of the Instagram filters. Right now, just looking at this is starting to look a little bit of a more dated process. I would say, what is this? Kind of like a cross between like the process filter and then the instant filter, which is supposed to mimic like a Polaroid. And then I'm going to go to my shadows, and let's see, I think I want to make those more blue. So I really want to darken those shadows out, get some nice purples and blues in there. And now it's again starting to take on this different kind of aesthetic. So maybe that aesthetic now is, oh, it looks like I put a filter on this. However, if this were a photograph that was originally taken 40 years ago, and I was applying this type of chemical process to it, or sorry, this type of digital process to it, that would be adding a different level of meaning to it as well. So these are all things and adjustments that you can be doing to affect the overall aesthetic of an image that you have, and then these are adding different levels of meaning. So I'm going to cancel this because I also want to talk about the other tool, and that is the channel mixer. And there are actually books written about what a channel mixer is. So it can be, it definitely can be a little bit complicated to explain. But what this does is that this takes, so every single pixel in an RGB image is made up of a mixture of a percentage of red, green, and blue. And that's how you're getting all the different tones in between. So what this will do is that this is saying, okay, all of the pixels, each of them has a different mixture of red and green and blue. This is saying, okay, this is for the part of the pixel that is the red. I'm going to make it so that it's more blue. And that is, I'm achieving that in a couple of ways. I'm either subtracting the green from it, so this way all the red pixels, which are normally have red at 100% because they are the red channel, if you're suddenly then taking those pixels and then subtracting the green from it, then that is creating, having it be, the blue is kind of what's going to be coming out more. And because these are the red pixels, by upping the blue, you're not really doing that much, and that's because they're on the opposite side of the spectrum. But really you're going to be getting changes by playing with the green. And that is saying if you are adding to the green, that is then saying that you're going to be adding to all the red pixels, you're going to also be adding those pixels as red to all the ones to all the green channels. So yes, and if you wanted everything to look very, very red, you would then up the blue as well. So what this is all saying is essentially, when I have it something like this, it is saying that every single pixel that is red is now going to be having their red, their green, and their blue all up at 100%, so that then, this is very confusing. Let me think of a better way to describe this. Okay, so what this is saying is that the red channel, so the pixels that are going to be showing red, it's also all the green pixels, all the red all the green parts of the pixels, all the red parts of the pixels, and all the blue pixels are also going to be showing red. That's a better way of putting it. And that's why you get this very red image. Now, I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to go back to the channel mixer again. And this time, I'm going to have it be green. And so what this will do is if I up this, it's going to be relatively green, because what this is saying is that all of the pixels that are here, the ones that the green part of every single pixel, so the green channel of every pixel is going to be producing twice as much green and the same level of red and blue. But then if I up this as well, this is now saying that each pixel is going to be displaying red, green, and blue at 100% or at 200%. So the saturation is going to be very, very high. And then these are all getting routed to the green channel. So instead of there being a mixture in each pixel of a percentage of red, green, and blue, now every single pixel is going to be showing, all three channels are going to be green. And they're all going to be at 200%. So you're getting this 600% highly saturated image that you might not even really be able to print because it is such a screen-based color. So it's going to cancel that. So what is this good for? This is good for when you're trying to adjust things to print. And also when you're trying to account for things to look different on different monitors. And I'm talking about this because in terms of this class, it's not going to be a huge concern because we're not really going to be printing a lot of these things. But for those of you that are using this as an intermediate process, so you do want to print out a lot of these images, or maybe you're wanting to screen print some of these images and you're needing to really adjust the colors, or maybe you're trying to work with a lot of different screens or different video adjustments, and so you're needing to understand how these different images and videos are going to look on different monitors. This is where you can make these different kinds of adjustments. And it's also, I think it's just a very powerful process to help you understand the way that these digital images are actually being displayed on monitors and how they're being interpreted by these digital tools. So, and then there's also one more tool that I was going to go into, and that is the curves tool. And this is kind of like an advanced color tool. And so instead of only having these sliders to work with, you're now able to draw out a curve. So what you're seeing again is an approximation of your image. It's looking at every single pixel in the image and it's saying, here are these different levels of really dark darks and the really light lights, and here's everything in between. And then this is this starting curve. This is just the average curve that's saying, okay, this is the tallest, the highest high, and this is the lowest low. And what you can do is, instead of only working with these, and you can see this is essentially what you do with the levels, you can also go in and actually edit these curves. So I can draw my own curve, and this creates some really interesting color effects. And you can also switch back to that and edit each of these different points. So a good way to think about this is, if you think about this diagonal line in the center as kind of your average. So if you end up creating an inverse, and I'm gonna cancel this and then do another one. It's just to simplify this a little bit more. Go back to curves. So if you're trying to do something like an inverse, you can actually go, and this will essentially create an inverse image. So it's saying all the areas that were very, very dark are now going to be the lightest, and all the areas that were the lightest are now going to be the darkest. And you can create things like this, so that's saying that's going to be no contrast, because you have this perpendicular line. And then depending upon where this is, so this is saying that you're going to have mostly midtones, because you're at 50% here along this scale from dark to light. And then you're going to have the most number of pixels be half of the range of pixels be dark, half the range of the pixels be light, but only at these midtones. And then the other half are going to be a little bit lighter. And then if I move this up, that means that it's going to be it's going to be lighter versus darker in terms of that mid-level of contrast. And then you can also start working with having multiple curves of intersection. And so what starts to happen with this is that it's saying, okay, now in this mid-tone, we're going to have the most number of things be very, very light. And then we're also going to have a medium number of things be in the midtones, and then only a few number of things be very, very dark. So you can play with these settings a lot, and for this exercise and for this class, I just want you to know where these options are. I think that in terms of the color balance, that is definitely the easiest one to apply to images, and to be able to know kind of immediately, or with very little experience, to know how that's going to affect your overall image. When you start getting into the curves and the channel mixers, it's going to take a little bit more experimentation. And as I stated before, there are whole books written about these, and I definitely will provide some more resources in the lecture part of the module for this week, so for those of you that are interested can understand more about them. And really, I just wanted to show you where they are, because if you are going to be printing things, and if you are trying to develop some very interesting color effects, then these can be great places to start in terms of adjusting the color that you already have. So I'm going to cancel this, and then the last thing I'm going to show everyone is how to apply these effects as if they're a layer, so that then you can go and edit them out of order. So I'm going to create a selection, and this is what you're going to be doing for this exercise, is you're going to be essentially approximating a few different filters in a single image. So you're going to be trying to get a few different Instagram-like filters into one single selfie image. So I've made a selection, and then so what I would normally do if I wanted to change the color balance in the selection is I would go up to image and then apply the selection or apply the adjustment to the selection. But another way that you can do that is actually more powerful is if you actually work with it as an adjustment within the layer. So I'm going to go over here, and instead of creating a new layer, I'm going to create a new adjustment. Create new fill or adjustment layer. And so this is creating a new layer. It's a new type of layer. So I'm going to go up here. It gives me this long list. When I click that button, I'm going to say color balance. All right, so what happens? I now have a new layer, but instead of it holding a part of an image, it's actually holding the selection in the form of a mask. So selections, once they're stored in a layer or stored to be used for multiple parts of the same image or multiple layers of the same image, they start calling that a mask. And the idea is that, and this comes from photography and other even just painting techniques, where you mask off certain parts of an image so that if you're applying paint to them, for instance, and you go over the area with masking tape, it creates that line that essentially you're selecting the part of the image that you want to be only applying the paint to. And then even if you go outside the edge a little bit, it hits that tape. If you lift the tape up, you have that clean line. So that's actually where that term originated from. And it's also used in video a lot too. So what this layer has is the mask. So it's showing the selection, and then it also has the effect that you're applying. And in this case, this little icon is meant to signify the color balance. So how do I make these changes? Instead of getting the dialog box, I go up here into this properties tab that's showing up now that I have this effect selected. And what this allows me to do is this allows me to make these changes and let's see, let's do some highlights. I really want that to be some yellow. And so it's saving using the layers property in Photoshop, and that layers, that aspect of Photoshop that I again have said is really, really powerful. It's saving that adjustment in this file. So I can hide it, and then it'll go back to what my image looked like before I had applied that adjustment. So let's say I want to create a couple of these. So I'm going to go back to my background. You always have to make sure that you are selecting the area or the layer that you want to be adding these adjustments to. So I'm going to select this part. I'm going to do the same thing, hit that little icon to add the layer adjustment. I'm going to go to color balance, and then this time I want this to have a little bit more of the cyan, and then I want my shadows to have that blue. And you don't need to do anything to say okay, because these are adjustments that you continuously make. So let's say I want to go back to that first adjustment that I made, and I want to change that. So now I want to bring the red down a little bit in the midtone, or I want to up the yellow even more. So you're seeing now how this can be a very powerful feature of Photoshop, and when you're processing and when you're applying effects or adjustments, because you can go back and change them even after you have committed to them, and you can continue to say, okay, well, I don't know, I'm not sure if that's working or not, so let me see what it looks like without that. You can also change the order of them, and that is important when you start to having overlapping ones. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to create a selection that now is overlapping two other areas that I selected. I'm going to do this one more time. Color balance. So now I'm going to up the red. So now you can see how this is starting to apply these changes to these other areas, because this selection is within these two other selections that I already made. And another cool thing about this feature is that you can reorder things. So by changing the order of these effects, it will change the overall appearance. And also you can, let's say I want to lose one of these. Now I'm seeing, oh, well, this is what it looks like without that blue with that newest selection or that newest adjustment that I just created. So these are very, very powerful ways to save and work with adjustments and to be able to continue to fine tune that area that I have overlapping. So let's say you made an adjustment to one of these, and then you know, oh, well, that's changing the way that this other adjustment that I made is, and you can go in and continue to adjust for these things. And this is not possible when you are only applying the adjustment to the image using the selection tool. This is only possible when you're creating a layer adjustment or adjustment layer. All right, so this is a good starting point for everyone to finish up this third exercise for the week. And keep in mind that these selections don't have to just be polygons. They can be any kind of selection that you make. And it also doesn't have to be only color balance. For this exercise, I'd like you to stick to the color balance or the channel mixer if you would like to, but primarily the color balance in black and white. And just to get an idea of the way that these layers can interact with one another, and then how the power and the flexibility it gives you to really adjust and fine-tune any effects or adjustments that you're adding to your image. Okay, so definitely save this as a Photoshop file, similar to how Photoshop saves layers and allows you to continue to work with layers and that flexibility in the future after you've closed the project. The Photoshop will only retain these effects. So if you save this as a JPEG, that'd be fine for exporting it, but you wouldn't be able to go back in and change the color balance in one of these selections. So yes, save your Photoshop file and then follow the posted instructions to export and submit this exercise.